عذراً بيروت.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Lynette Tamim, and these are today's headlines. UN Emergency Relief Coordinator Stephen O'Brien is in Lebanon for talks with Lebanese officials on ways to confront the heavy burdens imposed by Syrian refugees. Syrian National Coalition President Khalid Khoja says Russia isn't committed to keeping Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in power. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is expected in Cuba to raise the U.S. flag at the restored American Embassy in Havana. UN Emergency Relief Coordinator Stephen O'Brien has held talks with senior Lebanese officials regarding ways to confront the heavy burdens imposed by the presence of over 1 million Syrian refugees in the country. O'Brien also met with Prime Minister Tamam Salam at the Grand Sarai. The visiting official was accompanied by UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Sigrid Kaag. He arrived in Beirut after wrapping up a trip to Yemen.
I've just had an extremely cordial and constructive meeting with His Excellency the Prime Minister, particularly focusing on the quality and the depth of the partnership between the United Nations and particularly the humanitarian arm and the government of Lebanon and on behalf of the people of Lebanon. Focusing, as we all face challenges across the world, on the particular issues that are both challenging and the opportunities, we hope, for the improvement and security and stability of the Lebanese people. So it's been a very helpful and useful context in which I'm now going to be able to continue my visit in Lebanon, looking at the effects locally for the people of Lebanon, but equally to recognise with gratitude the generous hospitality of the Lebanese to the many refugees who've sought security and safety in Lebanon as a country. So I wanted to put on record that there is a recognition from the international community for that generosity and that hospitality, and that we all need to work together in partnership to forge a future of stability and hope for the people of Lebanon, and indeed for those whom the Lebanese people are hosting and are currently in a refugee status.
About 24 protesters from a local civil society group have demonstrated outside the Tripoli Sarai in North Lebanon, demanding no more trash dumped in their city. Protesters from the so-called Independent Civil Action Committee, a small local group, said trucks coming from various regions of Lebanon had been dumping garbage in the country's second largest city. They demanded authorities take action to stop these illegal practices. The government has been wrestling with a mounting garbage crisis since July 17th, after the country's largest landfill in Nameh was forced to close after growing complaints from residents. Economy Minister Alain Hakim has toured the Beirut port to voice his objection to using the lots surrounding it to dump trash. Speaking to reporters, he said there's no solution in sight to end dumping waste near vital facilities. Trash is accumulating at the doors of one of the most important mills in Beirut. He called on the state to reuse landfills or export waste abroad as temporary solutions to the trash crisis. He warned that the accumulation of trash would have direct effect on the health of citizens. Hakim Eketa, a party member, said that impeding the work of the cabinet is increasing the crisis. The Union of Beirut Port Workers vowed to continue its endeavors until officials discard a decision to dump waste near the facility and to prevent all suspicious schemes. Syrian National Coalition President Khalid Khoja says Russia isn't committed to keeping Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in power. Speaking a day after talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Khoja said the Russian leadership wasn't clinging to Bashar al-Assad and was focusing on the need to preserve Syria's territorial integrity and prevent its collapse. It wasn't immediately clear whether Khoja's statement signaled a shift in Russia's stance or merely reflected Moscow's attempt to rally support for its new push to help mediate the Syrian conflict. Lavrov's meeting with his Saudi counterpart earlier this week highlighted continuing sharp differences about Assad's fate. Moscow has been a key backer of Assad throughout the conflict, lasting more than 4 years. And coming up next, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe expresses profound grief for his country's aggression during World War II. More after the break. Welcome back. You're watching the English newscast. A Palestinian prisoner who has been on hunger strike for the past 60 days has now entered into a state of coma. This is according to his lawyer, who says Muhammad Alan, an alleged Islamic Jihad member, stopped eating in June to protest against being held by Israeli authorities without charge. Israeli authorities have transferred Alan from one hospital to another after they struggled to find a medic who would feed or examine the prisoner without his will. Medics at Barzilai Medical Center, where Alan is being cared for, have refused to force-feed him, but are injecting his body with supplements essential for his survival. Alan was arrested in November of 2014 and placed under administrative detention for 2 6-month periods. Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu's efforts to create a coalition alliance with the country's pro-secular party have failed, pushing the country closer towards new elections. Davutoglu said a fresh election now appeared to be the only option after last-ditch negotiations between his Islamist-rooted AK party and the main opposition CHP yielded no deal. He urged Parliament to call for a new vote and said he would prefer it was held as soon as possible. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was reported to favor renewed autumn elections in the hope that the ruling party, which he founded, can regain the parliamentary majority it lost in elections in June. Moving on to Europe, the Greek Parliament has approved the draft deal for the $93 billion bailout package, allowing the deal to be taken to the meeting of European finance ministers in Brussels. The deal was approved this morning after an intense night-long debate where Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras was challenged by members of his own party. The deal comprises measures that add the sweeping new austerity demanded for the new 3-year program. Earlier during the fiery debate, dissenters in his own party angrily challenged the government, accusing it of reneging on promises it made before winning elections last January. Tsipras's left-wing party won elections in January on promises to repeal similar budget austerities imposed in return for Greece's 2 previous bailouts. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is expected in Cuba to raise the U.S. flag at the recently restored American embassy in Havana, another symbolic step in the thawing of relations between the 2 Cold War-era foes. Kerry, the first U.S. Secretary of State to visit Cuba in 70 years, will be accompanied by aides, members of Congress, and 3 U.S. Marines who last lowered the flag there in January 1961. Washington severed diplomatic ties with Havana as relations soured soon after the 1959 Cuban Revolution. Seeking to end the long hostilities, Cuban President Raul Castro and U.S. President Barack Obama announced last December they would restore diplomatic ties, reopen embassies, and work to normalize relations. Ahead of his trip to Havana, Kerry said the U.S. government will continue to speak out and stand for democracy in Cuba.
First of all, it isn't going to change overnight. It's just not going to change. We haven't even been there to raise our flag yet. I think that as we begin the process compared to the 54 years of what has been going on, which is no progress, we will begin to see a transformation take place. More people will travel, there'll be more exchange, more families will be reconnected, and hopefully the government of Cuba will itself make decisions that will begin to change things. And so I don't think you can measure a month and a half since we concluded the agreement to actually open the embassy to 54 years. That just doesn't work. Now, our spokesperson for the State Department spoke out publicly from the podium of the State Department, criticizing those people, that move on Sunday. And we will continue to speak out. Our preference is obviously for democracy, for a full embrace of the freedom of the Cuban people to choose their future.
Moving on to Asia, China has sent chemical experts into Tianjin to test for toxic gases after a series of deadly explosions. Locals have expressed fear for their safety after reports there could be hundreds of tons of dangerous chemicals at the site. But the team says the toxic and harmful substances on site are controllable, luckily. The explosion, which occurred on Wednesday night at a warehouse storing dangerous goods in the port city, has killed at least 50 people and injured more than 700 others, including 70 in critical condition. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has expressed profound grief for his country's aggression during World War II and vowed to never again repeat the devastation of war. In an address on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the end of the war and Japan's surrender, Abe also acknowledged that Japan has brought lots of suffering to innocent people, including to thousands of women sexually abused by the Japanese military across the Asia-Pacific region. But he stopped short of calling them comfort women, as has been repeatedly demanded by countries like China and South Korea. In his speech, Abe also made reference to the dropping of atomic bombs by the United States in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, vowing that Japan supports nuclear non-proliferation and the ultimate abolition of nuclear weapons. Abe had been criticized by some for playing down Japan's wartime record and trying to expand the role of the military. And now for technology lovers, Samsung has unveiled a new Galaxy Note phablet and a larger version of its curved screen S6 Edge smartphone, marking a fresh bid by the South Korean company to revive momentum in its handset business. Samsung is the world's top smartphone maker, but its market share fell in the second quarter when the company released its critically acclaimed S6 models, squeezed by Apple's upscale iPhones and cheaper offerings from Chinese rivals. The manufacturer responded with S6 price cuts and moving up the Note, unveiling from its usual early September spot ahead of the latest iPhone launch expected in September.
Well, it's more and more parity. I mean, they've got the Note 5, which we all expect, the Galaxy Note 5, and the Galaxy Edge 6 Plus. The word plus is important in there because guess who else has a plus in their name for their large, sort of their phablet? Apple does with the 6 Plus. But these are devices that are beautiful looking, great materials. They've got more glass, less plastic. They've got high-end, 13 megapixel cameras. They've got some neat features, even some stuff that was completely shocking to us in that they have a live streaming feature powered by YouTube. So Periscope, Meerkat, look out. Suddenly, if you buy one of these Samsung phones, you're going to have that in there.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. UN Emergency Relief Coordinator Stephen O'Brien is in Lebanon for talks with Lebanese officials on ways to confront the heavy burdens imposed by Syrian refugees. Syrian National Coalition President Khalid Khoja says Russia isn't committed to keeping Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in power. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is expected in Cuba to raise the U.S. flag at the restored American Embassy in Havana. Those are your top stories for this Friday. I'm Linda Tamim, and I wish you all a very nice weekend.